It's like
Dude,
30
I
years
use
old.
that from you, yeah, like from like, do you know that I student taught with Steve?
No.
Yeah, back in 2008.
Did not.
Yeah, and so I honestly, yeah, I use that same acronym because of,
Tread.
I'm a nerd
Teacher
teacher.
reads every day. And-
Reads aloud every day.
Well, that wasn't a part of it, but it could be.
Then we have to
And this
change it
was
to tree.
what everybody in this school was doing,
Okay.
15 years ago or 10 years ago.
Okay.
All right.
Anyway, so it's my read aloud book, and so what I decided to do is I got to the end of the chapter and I said to the kids, I'm going to ask you to read the first part of the next chapter by yourself and then create your questions. I'd like to see what you can do with this on your own. So I had a bunch of kids working on this, and I got some really nice questions from them. I got some awkward and uncomfortable pieces that made me realize what I needed to work on, which I guess is why we're here. And I put them in this packet for you. I scored them more or less generally 4 3s and 2s. And on the pages that were 3s or 2s that I had particular notes about, you'll see a little star.
Okay. So when looking
Yes.
at these, thank you.
I'm sorry, that's
No, that's okay.
kind of a long
Question.
prologue.
No. So I remember, I went into your room.
Yes.
Earlier this week? Or
Yes,
yeah.
you were in
So,
2 days ago.
And they were reading My Side of the Mountain, and the kids were bringing their questions to the table that they had. They all had different questions,
Yeah.
and they were engaging in conversation and sharing their opinions, and they were excited about being in that group. You could tell that they really liked the book, and I also noticed that you focused a lot on the character, telling them that the character of this book, their moves, their actions, what they say, will say a lot about the author's theme and purpose. So you're trying to link that when you look at characters, what they say or do has a lot to do for a
Yeah.
reason, the author's purpose.
Yeah.
And the standard that you're looking at is 4.1, refer to details and examples in the text when explaining what the text says, and when you're drawing inferences. And then I saw a lot of 4.3 about describing in depth the character, the setting, the event, story or drama.
Yeah.
And then in order to unpack these standards to reach park alignment, I went into the park and I looked at the different ways that students have to answer questions. And so I thought it was interesting because I think it's really important for them to answer questions. I also want to know and have you think how we're going to capture those answers
Mm-hmm.
and analyze them. Because I found some questions in Park, and I thought maybe we could take a look at them and see what do students have to know and be able to do in order to be proficient on questions like these.
Comparing, contrasting on this one first, I have to be able to.
Mhm. So which statement best describes the difference between the information in the wild horses of the island and the information in the wild ponies of,
Yeah, Chincoteague, I think it is.
okay. So,
Yeah.
and it's,
And you have to remember the details.
Mhm.
You have to be conversant enough to say, yeah, I remember it does that, or I remember it doesn't do that.
right. So yes, comparing, contrasting, being able to choose the best. Because I'm sure there are some, I haven't read the articles, that may be
Right.
similar, but not necessarily the best.
And then it goes ahead to part B and says, okay, here's the evidence that maybe you were thinking of when you answered this part.
Mhm. So knowing that standard is that in depth in
Yeah.
terms of the questioning.
Yeah.
And I know you just started working on asking thoughtful questions
Mhm.
that dig deeper. How do you think we can capture their answers so that we can align
I feel
it more to Park?
sorry,
No.
to interject. I just feel like always for the Part Bs, they have to provide the evidence in some way. And so that if we're trying to connect it back into their elliptical questions that they're asking, that they are providing the evidence, because that's always what they're asking
Mhm.
for the Part B. And then, so I thought we had maybe discussed too, like if they choose one of the questions to focus on, and then maybe at the bottom in their discussion, they could maybe try to capture it down below with the actual evidence to show,
Right.
like, where either the question was coming from.
And then is it the best evidence, right?
Right.
You know, that's
And
too.
sometimes,
And-
yeah, it won't be,
and
sometimes in their
sometimes it won't be, and
discussions.
that's a great teaching point,
Yeah.
that you can say, okay, that is evidence, but is there evidence of the
Right.
best evidence? I was thinking they can do it individually on their own, like
Mhm.
you said, or could the group, you know,
You know, that's what I meant,
pick
like in
three
their
questions,
discussion,
you know,
right?
pick
So,
two or
like,
three questions
that
they're
would-
all gonna do,
Yeah.
right?
I think
So
that's really good.
Because in doing it individually on their own.
Are you
is
saying in the
important.
discussion part, or are you saying, like before they go meet, they'll answer the question? 'Cause
Yes, before they go, maybe they can do it on their own.
okay,
This is up to you, this is where you come
Okay.
in. They can do it on their own, with the questions there.
yeah.
And then say, now I'd like to take us to a place where we all answer the same question,
Mhm.
and perhaps each of them takes a turn to which one are we gonna do? You might have to nudge it a little bit, because
Yeah.
it might not be what. And as a group, can we agree that we're all, you know, 2 or 3 questions we're gonna take for homework tonight, and we're gonna answer them, so that we're prepared for study group when we come back. And again, talking about and supply that evidence. Not only the question, but you want the page number, and you want the
Mhm.
evidence, and you want their answer to their thinking. And we're gonna talk about that together as a group with this emphasis on best kind of thing. So that it's aligned to the rigor that the park wants. I know that back in the days when I was with PEVC, it was all about directing it with schema and what's your inferential thinking. Now it's linked to the best, not just evidence, but the best evidence. And practicing that, because that's what they'll have to demonstrate when they get to park. Our questions, they're gonna throw them because they're gonna say, well, that's it, and they're probably right. It is that. But is it the best? And what makes it the best? You know, having those metacognitive discussions about, you know, how does a reader know that's the best question?
Mhm. It's almost supposed to like a little mini
Right.
debate for them to, kind of.
So what would be your next step or reteach?
Well, this is good because it kind of deals with the problems I had with this week.
Okay.
I felt that like I said, I had some kids
So
who
what's
did
reality?
real-
What were the problems that they?
Well, I
Just
think,
name it.
I think they had trouble putting things into questions,
Mhm.
and that's not really the skill we want anyway. We want them to identify information and support it. It's, they seem to be weak on theme. They seem to be weak on identifying a theme.
Well, I think you're right. Identify information and support it, but based on a question, right?
Well, I think so, and this, this form that we've been using, like I said, I modified it. I felt that I gave it more structure and support, but I didn't always get questions that were pointed and clear, and I didn't always get questions that I felt would lead us very far in group discussion.
So let me ask you this. If questions weren't fluid and clear, what would be the reciprocal effect of their answers to the questions? Would
Yeah, it might not be clear either,
Right.
right? It'd be just
Right.
sort of a little bit vague or a little less defined.
Mhm.
And, looking at this reminds me about how strong these skills have to be.
Mhm.
So, what I'd like to do is perhaps move on from this form now and try something different that helps me do this a little bit more.
What do you think that
Well,
might be?
we
What's your
mentioned
take?
last week 2-column notes,
Mhm.
and I thought maybe that's something I should try. I don't know, maybe 3-column notes, because there's
Yes, I was thinking too. I was changing.
because that gives you a
Right.
column for best evidence.
Right.
Right?
Well, and Steph Harvey does have a lesson on thick and juicy questions, that could be a mini lesson that might
Uh-huh.
help. I got that right.
Well, the kids were strongly motivated to participate in this. They loved the book we're doing.
Oh,
and
that was so apparent. I mean, and you were so engaging with them.
Oh, thank you.
Giving them lots of positive feedback, and it was, you could tell that they were really interested in this book, that what 12-year-old boy leaves his family and goes and lives in the Catskill.
Yeah.
Just the whole plot of the book, and how does he survive, and what
Yeah.
makes it, yeah.
Well,
It's very, yeah, she's got thick and thin questions.
okay.
Reading with the question in mind. And she talks a lot about, if you're not reading with that metacognitive, we always refer to it as a movie going on in your mind. If that's not part of your reading and sticky noting along the way, so you don't lose, it captures the text. So that you can go back easily to that and be able to refer to that page without doing it's not labor intensive. So, and then being able to put that into a 3-column note makes it so much easier.
Well, I think that's my next step, is to look at her and follow some of these mini lesson ideas for
Mhm.
and then consider using a different sort of capturing
But
method.
in reflecting though, there is nothing wrong with what you did. I mean, Harvey Daniels made this text, these job roles, so it gets people started, and that's what you're doing.
Yeah.
So you may want to rethink how you want to scaffold this out before you bring anything in, or could you add the 3-column notes for homework, and that could be a discussion. I'm just saying, I don't want you to abandon anything you've
I
done, because
appreciate
it seems
that.
like it's working,
Yeah.
and you've got those kids engaged, and
Yeah.
engagement is half the battle.
Yeah.
Now it's taking the instruction and aligning it to knowing in mind they're going to have the best answer. And perhaps that's how you talk about with your literature circles, not making it personal, because you don't want a kid to think, oh, I don't have the best answer, but let's talk about what that means in terms of,
Well, I think in that way, you can curate the answers, right? You talk about
Bingo. There you
curating
go.
things, and then you could say, and this is the
Collectively
one that
do
I
it.
think really is the one that scores for all of us.
I like this collective idea too,
Yeah.
where you take one where you think it's got the most potential, and as a group craft it so it becomes the best answer. So that everyone is feeling valued and participatory in that, and not one student's getting the credit. Oh, Steve, you always get the best answer. So, oh, geez. I know. He does, but.
Oh,
Anyway.
Well, this is very helpful, I appreciate
Good.
it. I wonder if there's anything else. I just had to think with them out loud a lot about theme again, and I know that, thinking about this, I know that theme is a big part of this year. In fact, I guess I would say of the standards, the 3 standards I was trying to address, that was the standard that was the least successful.
Right, because in this, here's a writing prompt that they'll have to do based on reading. You're on a passage from The Wild Horse in this, of the island, and The Wild Ponies. And in the thunder and rain, the ponies make an annual swim. Think about how the illustrations from the passage and how they help the reader learn more about the ponies. Write an essay explaining what can be learned from illustrations about the life of ponies, described in the passages, include details from all 3 sources in your explanation. So that's what, they have to read this, so, but I think, yeah, so here's another one too. This is a passage, 3, those wacky shoes.
Oh, the
So what is the main theme of the story? That's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And then what sentence from the story best supports the answer to part A? So,
Well, let me just ask you guys how you explain the theme in a sort of bite-sized way. Because what I did with the kids was I said, if I ask you what the story's about, you say, well, it's about this kid who did this. And so what I want to do is ask you what it's about besides that. try to step out a little bit of just the concrete retail and tell me, what's it about besides that?
I would, yeah, I mean, that same term, or even just saying, like the life lesson, what can you learn from the character?
Uh-huh, life
Um,
lesson.
Yeah, I just feel like that they can connect to
Well,
those
that's what
words.
this is, look at this. What's the main theme? Overcoming fear, being creative can
Yeah.
solve problems.
Mhm.
Those are life lessons right there.
Because I feel like they understand that, because like, there's some, like I can think of, I mean, Pauline, even just recently I was asking about theme, and she wanted to tell me the main idea.
Mhm.
But most of my students, they always think that whenever they see theme, they remember life lesson, what can I learn from a character, what can I take out of the
Mhm.
story?
From the character.
Yeah, so that it's not like you're not repeating, it's not a summary, it's not a gist, that it's
Oh,
something
thank you so
beyond it.
much.
I don't know, I feel like that, those words help them.
Yeah.
Because I think theme, sometimes they think that it is maybe just like a main idea.
Yeah,
Like if these are what,
Yeah.
it lingers throughout the book, it's a
Mhm.
message.
Right.
That, you know, but the.
Yeah,
the
or
author wants to
moral
get
is like
this-
another word that we'll
Mhm.
use too.
I mean, I remember, you know, talking about books like Lois Lowry and with, you know, she could write anything, but she's writing to mainly predominantly fourth graders in this book. What do you think she's trying to tell you? You know, what creates a theme?
I
And
like that.
Mhm.
What's the author trying to tell you?
Alan Say is really good about that when I look at his books. You know, look at all his books. Let's look at these last 3 books we've read. What's the main tie that goes through it?
Mhm.
And, you know, where's that tie coming from? His life. And what is the theme that he tells you in each of these stories? In Paper Cranes,
And it's like the
just
values too.
the
right?
values,
Like
yeah.
our Brahmo values, like,
Oh.
we always
Oh,
talk
yeah.
about a lot of those, and then I try to
Mhm.
connect them.
Okay, well, where were you guys when I was trying to talk about this earlier
That's why we're
today?
here. So great.
This is really good, because I felt a little stuck,
And that's why this is what I would like that team to be. Let's
Yeah.
get unstuck, you know,
Yeah.
together.
Yeah.
So thank you for being
Yeah.
open about it.
Okay, so
Right.
I will,
And really capturing those answers.
yeah.
So that we can analyze our students answering the questions with a level of rigor that they should be and can be based on evidence from the text, and that's aligned with how they're going to be assessed on part.
Mhm.
So, Kristen,
Yeah.
what are you up to next week? What do you think?
Well, that's what I'm thinking in my head, if I should try, I mean, not completely abandon like the jobs that I'm doing,
Yeah.
but maybe
No.
like incorporate somehow, like as I don't know, that like one day maybe everybody doesn't really do their job, and I kind of have them, like if I did a mini lesson surrounding like the 3 column notes and we just tried it, like as a whole. Like,
Okay.
if everybody
Yeah.
did, like, would that kind of work to try to nail the best kind of evidence?
So what would your template look like? I mean, just do it on the back. We may not have the content to put in it, but, or can you think of a book that,
Well, I mean, yeah, what did I recently just read Farrow's Beautiful Daughters.
Mhm.
I don't know if you guys are familiar.
Yeah, it's
with it.
awesome.
I did it for the value lesson for this month of
Oh.
graciousness and courtesy. So I'd probably do that they would come up with their different questions, but I'd want to guide them and then maybe focus more on, I don't know if theme's going to be present though, because they're in their earlier rounds.
Mhm.
I would probably work on like the character type motivation questions, since they're learning all about their characters at the beginning of the story. So if I focused on that at the beginning and had them come up with, or maybe it would just like one day work on just characters. So they question, and they would have to provide their answer in their third one, and then the evidence, right? Is that the 3
Mhm.
columns that then we would have? And then they would meet with their group to discuss the question they came up with. And hopefully they'd have different questions that they'd be discussing with each other, the answer, and then they could also then discuss like the best evidence, so that when the student posed a question, giving the other students time to think about the answer, find the evidence, and then really have that discussion around best evidence. Is that something
So are you
you're
think,
looking
I
for?
think, you know, just jump into it and try it.
Yeah.
I do think that, so are you, if I'm hearing you correctly, do they all have the access to the book? Isn't that a mentor text?
Oh,
Most data?
well, yeah. Well, I mean, I actually do have like, I put it on the text for them, because I ended up doing a narrative writing task prompt connected to that, where they had to write a journal entry from a different point of view.
That's great.
So I don't, should I do it? I meant like, I would do like a mini lesson whole group, but then they would break out into their Lit Circle groups and do it about their Lit Circle book.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
And not do it necessarily with one
That would help you move
book.
forward.
Yeah, like with
Okay.
Lit Circles, like, so would that be fine? That
That
like
would be
maybe
fine. I
one day
think
kind of just took
it'd
a
be-
break from like everybody doing a different job and kind of just focused on.
And they could come up with
Finding
their own
best
questions,
evidence.
because we want them to do
Yeah,
that, because
yeah.
that's what
So it's
Stephanie's
like
saying.
everybody would
But
work on
then,
questioning basically that
However,
day.
the day when they break out, would you want them just to focus in on one question, so that if you could come
Right.
back? Because if they do
They're all
the
have- yeah,
triple,
they all have
if they do
different
the
ones.
triple entry journal,
Right.
then they can be answering their own questions.
Right.
And citing the evidence in the
Right.
text. And that could probably be either in class or at home. But when you have them working in a group, not all the time, I'm just trying it.
Yeah.
Have them do the same one so that they can discuss it in the lit groups. Like, someone in the group gets to choose, all right, Kristen, we've all got good questions, who's gonna get a
And only
chance to?
focus
Let's just
on
focus on this one
question.
and vary that. It doesn't have to be every time, but I do think that having that time to critically analyze, and build the best answer
Mhm.
by citing evidence, would give them opportunities as a group to build off of each other's thinking
Right.
and to go deeper, and then have a chance to do that independently as well, so that, that you're not always just answering somebody else's questions. That
Yeah.
good readers always have questions in your mind,
Right.
and you're doing that, but then as a book club, we're gonna try to take this on as a group,
Right.
so
Yeah.
you could see.
Yeah,
when it
I
comes
think,
out.
yeah, I think it's definitely gonna be worthwhile to do that. Yeah, 'cause we've been practicing the AB questions anyway recently, so that'll be a
Oh,
good
good.
tie-in, like, they'll know exactly what I'm talking about when I say,
You are just
We're
too
trying to
on
do-
it.
well, I mean, mine's right after break.
Mhm. Exactly.
Yeah, it's like a day
Yeah,
after.
so,
Well, I think I'll do these mini lessons and then I'm gonna tackle theme again. So I might have something for you next week in regards to that. But I'm gonna work with you and keep doing the same thing. I like what you said about doing one question for the whole group to think about. So I'll probably do pretty much the same thing. I just wanna finish this stuff about theme.
no, I think that's good. I think you can attach questioning to it. So will you bring in, do you think, a 3-column note?
I think so,
Kristen, and
yeah,
then we can
I think
discuss
I'll
that.
try it.
Okay, that's great. All right.
Is it okay if I pick a couple different topics of questions for them to think about and not just
Absolutely.
one, so that they have a
Okay.
little wiggle room,
Mhm.
like depending on the parts they're reading in their text?
I think sometimes as they're reading, they're asking their own questions. When they come to the group collectively,
Mhm.
it doesn't mean they always have to focus on one, but focusing on one could build.
Oh, no, I like the idea of, like,
Yeah.
the one question for the discussion. I just meant, I guess, like, when they're thinking of their questions, maybe independently, that it doesn't just have to be,
No.
like, one
absolutely.
type is all I would,
Absolutely.
okay.
No,
Okay.
no, I don't think so. Because then it takes away, the automaticity and the autonomy. And because we're all different readers and we think differently.
Yeah,
And that's
okay.
that's another feature of a book club, is it makes it
Right, that they-
interesting
yeah.
to see what you bring to the book and what your questions are as opposed to mine.
Mhm.
And building, and then it's a different type of discussion.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Okay.
Any questions? No?
I have a question, just because I'm a little bit confused. So, Kristen, what standard are you going to be collecting the 3-column notes in?
Well,
I
that's
heard
what
you-
I'm,
I heard you
I guess,
originally say it was gonna
the
be.
character motivation ones, that would be more like drawing inferences.
which-
Or describe, it would be 4.1 or 4.3,
Okay.
depending on the type of question they pose. Or not 4, I'm looking at his, of course, 5.
So my question is thinking about what you know about them right now, which one are they in need of more?
The character one, I
Okay,
think.
4.3?
Yeah, to kind of maybe pick up on like the challenges that they're facing, possibly even.
okay, and which text are you gonna use?
Well, they're Lit Circle books, so they're all gonna have like their different books. So do you want, so right now we're reading There's Hatchet, Holes, Loser, Beaver 1793.
So I would encourage you to narrow that field for this discussion and pick one of the groups,
Okay,
right? And be thinking about what's that passage that they're gonna be reading, and what's that evidence gonna look like. So if you were creating the exemplar right now, you would come with Hatchet. You would say they're gonna read Hatchet chapter 3.
mhm,
More than likely, this is the question that they're gonna generate.
mhm,
And here's good evidence, and here's best evidence.
mhm.
So you can start to kind of anticipate that,
Okay.
right? So this group then you would have calibrated with this group so that they know exactly your thinking. And the next week, you're gonna bring their responses and compare that to, okay, so the ideal response was this evidence, right? And we anticipated they'd be struggling with.
Like some, a different piece of evidence that
Right,
worked but
right,
wasn't the best.
Right. So what I encourage you to do in preparation for this is not all of those books are going to be at the point where character motivation is
Right.
a major play. So which of those books is really going to have that piece,
Okay.
so to speak,
Yeah,
if that's what you want to focus on. But I'm just trying to narrow you to a standard,
okay,
right?
Mhm.
Because then you can calibrate on that.
okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does.
Right? So it's hard with lit circles because you don't have a common text. But
Right.
pick one text
Okay,
and then come up with what's the ideal answer, and what's the ideal evidence for that. And this group will then pick up with, okay, well, what did you get? So do they have good evidence? Do they have the best evidence? And so when you analyze your work, Kristen, that's the point where, so of the 6 kids, or how many kids are in this group,
right,
3 of them got the best evidence, 2 of them got evidence,
Mhm.
one of them, missed the
Way
boat
left.
entirely,
Okay.
right? So the conversation for this group would be, so what did you do with the 3 kids that got it? Why did they get it? The 2 kids that didn't get it, what do they need,
mhm,
right? And you would design with this group what you're gonna do to help those 2 kids.
okay,
In Steve's piece, you've seen, what I heard you say is I'm working on theme. That's a specific standard, right?
Yeah.
And so the question, Steve, is which text are you gonna use that's going to have the theme there for them? Because if it's lit circles and it's a novel, they may not come across theme until deep, deep into the text.
So again, the same thing you're telling Kristen, identify the novel that will provide that.
Identify the
information.
text, right? And you can step out of your novel, and lit circles can be about articles as well. So you can, I'm not saying you need to, but you
Yeah.
can.
I think I'll stick with it because the energy is so good. But
So-
I do know that you can do that. We could do poems, we could do nonfiction
Yeah.
articles.
I'm just saying, which lit circle book, Steve,
We'll create that.
is gonna have theme come up?
Okay, now let me ask you something else. Do you feel, this stuff that we're doing is all about students generating questions. Do you think we should generate the question so that we can focus on not them coming up with questions and some are way off, but so that we can just focus on, here's how you answered and here's the evidence you showed? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
It sounds to me like you're saying, let's move away from that.
no, I think I think you're creating a hybrid here, What I want children to do, so take the test prep out of it and the standards out of it, is I want children to be aware of theme and to be thinking about theme throughout a text, right? And in most cases, they're looking at character and character change to figure out theme, right?
Yeah.
And so, having kids generate questions, I want them to be generating questions throughout a book that's going to lead them to a theme, right? So what Kristen is saying is the initial questions in a book are around character and character motivation. That's absolutely correct. do they know at the beginning of the book, what questions do you ask, right? And why are those important? That's understanding how texts are organized. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so, so no, you want them to generate questions.
And you were shaking your head too. You were like, no, have them generate the
Right.
question.
No, yeah.
But the problem with it is that for them to discuss, they have to all have, and that's what Jody's saying, like, it's one thing to generate questions, it's another thing to have had the same question, so that you can actually discuss it. Does that make sense?
So going back to that
Back and
idea of
forth. I
curating.
mean, not one way or the other, I think is.
I mean, this is just me, like, I would look at their work and see, well, we nailed it. Most of us have very similar questions, and I would say, Kristen's in my group, I would say, Kristen, what question did you come up with around character? Kristen shares that question, and then for the group, okay, I've selected Kristen because I know that's a common question. Then I want the group to talk about that question citing evidence, right?
Right.
Then I'm probably gonna, this is my own style, I'll use the term, I'm gonna curate, this is my term, I'm gonna write down all the evidence. Then I'm gonna ask the kids, so you told me all this evidence, now the question is which one's the best evidence? And let them talk about that,
Okay.
right? Only issue with that is it's completely oral. So I'm gonna either watch a couple kids and take notes on those kids, or I'm gonna do what you suggested, which was, in the beginning, Kristen, you said, like, they're gonna have to write it either initially or on the back end, so at the end, as a way to capture it, right? But the purpose is the discussion. It's just tricky in lit circles when you don't, that you have to keep track of that, to gather that.
Well, that, I guess, brings us back to the very question you started with, how to capture.
Right.
So,
And you've captured right now, if you use the 3-column notes, you're gonna capture that if they have a common question. Right? So that's, the rub here is if Kristen writes a different question than you write, is that a big deal? It is if they're not writing good questions that have multiple pieces of evidence that they need to sift through, right? If they're just flat, obvious one question, that's the rub.
yeah.
If they can't write really good questions, then that's where you have to give them the support of the group.